I am Catherine DeCristofaro. I am one of the librarians at the St. Mary's County Library. And Emma is going to be running our chat today to make sure if you have any technical issues, you can put that there. And she'll also be sharing links to any recommendations or information that Christina and Lauren share with us. And without further ado, let's introduce our wonderful authors. Where did it go? And sorry, give me 1 second. I had my nice little introduction all set and I want to get that.
You're fine. Thank you for having us. We can say that while you are looking for that. And thank you for everybody for joining us. Hope you are all having a good Thursday. I keep forgetting what day of the week it is. It's not like Friday every day.
How is it not Friday? It's because we're not drafting right now. We turned in revisions yesterday, and today I was like, this is so weird. I could do whatever I want.
I know. I was like, do we have until Monday? This is odd.
Maybe I'll nap.
And okay, now I can officially read your introductions. So Christina Lauren is the combined pen name of the longtime writing partners and best friends, Christina Hobbs and Lauren Billings. New York Times, USA Today, and #1 international bestselling authors of The Beautiful and Wild season series, The Unhoneymooners, Twice in a Blue Moon, The Honey Don't List, In a Holidays, and many more. The most recent novel is The Soulmate Equation. It was released on May 18th, and it was an instant New York Times bestseller. And I can personally say it might have made me swoon more than any book in the last year.
I love that.
Yes. I told my husband, I was like, I had to give the book a hug when we were done. So good. And now we get to talk about it.
Yay!
So before I get started asking my questions, is there anything that you ladies would just like to say about the book in general, or?
Sure. It's our first hardcover adult hardcover, I should say. And it was a real joy to write. We wrote it during the pandemic last year in March and April of 2020. And so I think this was the reason why our sanity was still in check when we hit the summer. And we're facing a year of virtual learning with our kids. And we're just happy to talk anything about the science or the characters or anything like that. It was really one of the most fun experiences we've had as authors.
It was really from like outlining to drafting to revising. It was all just like joy.
Yep.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It's not always like that.
Yeah. Aspiring writers, do not worry.
That's good to know. So how did you come up with the idea for the Soulmate Equation?
So we had been really fascinated with the Theranos scandal, which was it's that blood testing company that had this sort of huge scam of a technology where they said they could test like all these different markers in your blood based on a drop of blood. And there's a really great nonfiction book called Bad Blood, written by John Carreyrou, that you guys can check out at your local library. It's fantastic. It's also a very good audiobook. And it's basically the whole story of that. And so we were like, I don't know, biotech is kind of fun, like this high stakes and there's a lot of tension built in. And then at the same time, we were also doing the 23andMe ancestry kits. And so we were getting not just information about like where our ancestors had come from, but also these random updates about like, things that you can, possibilities based on your DNA, like how much Neanderthal DNA do you have? And, do you taste soap when you eat cilantro? And do you have thick or thin tooth enamel, stuff like that? And it was like, well, if you can learn these kinds of things about your own biology when you're doing these kits, why couldn't you theoretically also learn about personality compatibility and love compatibility? And why couldn't DNA predict how well you and another person might hit it off? And so it kind of just came from there.
Amazing. Did you do any actual scientific research into DNA to prepare for the book?
Well, Bo has a PhD in neuroscience.
Amazing.
And her husband is a biochemist. So in addition to them already being like basically, diploma geniuses, we like asked readers who had any sort of background in like genetics or
genetic testing,
that kind of stuff. And we had a couple of them that read and found things that, you know, were really surprised what we got right, but then like, you know, told us the things that we had gotten wrong. And obviously this technology does not exist, but there are companies that are doing trying to do similar things. Like some of them involve pheromones and stuff, but River has obviously taken it way beyond that. And Lo is usually, because she's a scientist, it's like if something is so far-fetched, it like really ruins it for her. So when we were doing it, it was like a fine line between finding something that like what we would need for this, you know, to be true, like what River would need. Lo can explain all of that, but yeah.
I mean, it was about how would we convince ourselves to invest in this company if we started hearing about it, right? And, you know, a lot of the companies that are looking at genetic matchmaking are using like maybe 1 or 4 at most genes, and they're looking at similarities. They're not looking at like a compatibility function that correlates with long-term marital happiness or sexual attraction or personality compatibility. They're just looking at like genetic markers. And, you know, I mean, we have 20 to 25,000 genes. So if you're asking somebody to fill out a questionnaire for dating and there's 20,000 questions and you overlap with somebody on 4 of them, that's not really super compelling, right? So it was just fun to think about, like, how would we make it compelling? How would we make this work?
Fascinating. So you mentioned River. So Jess is the other main character in the book. They feel so real and they feel like such fully developed people. How did they grow as characters when you were writing them?
When we write, so we usually always start with, I mean, in this case, we started with River in some ways because it's River's company and River's technology. But usually what we do is we start with our heroine, and we don't figure out who will fix her or complete her. We figure out who does he have to be for her to fall in love with him? Like who would fit with her life and complement her life? And then when it comes to the secondary characters and stuff, we think of like our friends and stuff and the things that, you know, what are the things that you have that friend where if you describe them, you would say this and somebody would know exactly what you were talking about. So we really do try and make them feel like real people.
So speaking of that, one of my favorite characters in this book is Fizzy. She is wonderful. Is she based on a real romance author? Is she perhaps one of you? Who is she? I want to read her books.
So we don't, thank you. We don't write ourselves into books, but of course we write what we know. And so a lot of the conversations between Jess and Fizzy in Twigs or just throughout the book, Twigs is a coffee shop where they work together every morning, are based on, you know, things that Christina and I might say to each other or ways that we might be silly or punchy or, you know, out there. And so that relationship felt very real to us, even though neither of us is a Fizzy or a Jess. It's like, it was easy for us to kind of create those friends.
I like that.
Yeah.
Can I ask how you started writing together? And has romance, all of the books that I know of yours have a romance theme. Have you always known you wanted to be romance writers?
So we started writing in fan fiction. That's where we met, was at San Diego Comic-Con in 2009. We were both in the Twilight fandom. Lo had written in some other fandoms, but that was my first. And she was putting on a panel at San Diego Comic-Con on FanWorks and invited me to come. And so I went and we met in person for the first time and just really got along and decided to write like a one-shot, which is like a short story in fan fiction, and then decided to write a book together, which is odd because we didn't know each other, but we just were like, let's do it. And had no idea like what that would entail. And that was, you know, 12 years ago. And I would say like, in the Twilight fandom, it became almost more than a Twilight fandom. It became like a romance fandom. Mm-hmm. It was just these women, some men, but mostly women, writing stories for women that were just love stories. They just happened to have the names Edward and Bella in them. So when we first started writing together, we tried to write this very serious book about this, you know, widower, and it was just very depressing. And it was when we went, let's just write about kissing and skinny dipping. And I think we really found our our niche.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny because I think we felt like, okay, if we're going to stop writing fic and try and write a book, it has to be a serious book, you know, even though that's not what we were reading when we were reading books. It would just sort of felt like to transition, we must prove ourselves as serious fiction writers, and it just wasn't fun for us. So I do think that that will carry over into everything we do. We like having the swoons, that heart drop, the stomach clenches, like those, all those feelings are so fun for us as readers. And it's fun to imagine giving that feeling to readers when we are writing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to say thank you for not writing serious books. I like the mash
We were not good at it.
better.
We would not be published to this day if we tried to do that.
So can you talk a little bit about the process of getting your first book published and how that might differ from your collaboration with publishers now?
Yeah, so we had been querying agents for about 10 months with a YA novel. And the process is long and grueling, and anybody who's been through it knows, but we got an offer. And so we told all the agents that had our manuscripts, we got an offer. And the one that we first got an offer from was a YA agent. And then Holly Root, our current agent, called and offered representation. And it's just so serendipitous that we went with her because the first agent only did children's and YA. So we would never have been able to query our romance. And I mean, there's just a whole bunch of details that I will skip because it's a long story that's, I think, interesting, but maybe not, we don't have time for. But basically, Christina's fic had been very popular. And around the time after romance was having this huge boom in 2012, she had taken it down, but we found out that people were trying to sell it to publishers as theirs because it had been written with a pen name. So we were on submission with our YA novel. We were just planning to like edit this fanfic and put it back online so nobody could sell it. And we rewrote it so entirely that there was hardly any of the fic still in there. And our agent said, hey, let me just show this to a couple editors. So the funny thing is our YA novel had been out for like 6 months with editors. And this one, the romance, sold in 12 hours. So it was just like, it's just a difference in the speed of the genre and what was selling at the time. And romance in 2012 was crazy, you know, so it was really fun. And yeah, so now we just submit like an idea and they say, okay, that's good. But you know, at the time we had to really like hustle.
What is the title of the YA novel that you wrote together?
Well, so the first YA novel we had out is called Sublime, but the one that had been out on submission is a book we still haven't published.
Oh, okay.
So it's just, we just shelved it and we'll probably come back to it someday because it's fun, but we just haven't had a ton of time. So.
Could you talk a little bit about your writing process? My very, very small experience with writing has only been myself. How does it work to have two of you do this together?
So I think we're lucky because coming from Fandom is just super collaborative. So it was just such an easy fit for us. Everybody's reading each other's stories and like editing each other's stories and stuff. And so we always try to get together to outline. And the pandemic made it a little harder, but in some ways it was almost like everyone else had to learn to work in the way that we do because we text, email, call, FaceTime, everything all day. So we outline together, then we go to our separate houses and, you know, we split it up by chapter, point of view, however we're going to do it. We write our parts, we upload them to Dropbox. Lo compiles them as we go and she'll send me like a growing document. It's really funny. Sometimes she'll change the title with like every document. It's very funny. And then at some point we'll start looking at it to see if it kind of looks like a book. Hopefully it does. It doesn't always. And we just revise. But the thing is every book is different. We have outlined so many books. You would think that we have it down to a science. And yet every time we sit down to outline, we are like, how do you outline a book? We're like Googling like ways to outline, and it's hilarious. It's like, you'd think we've never done this before, but like sitting on my desk is a book about how to write books. So yeah.
What you're saying is you keep your writing process fresh, which is why all of your books are wonderful. And it just means everyone should buy every book because it'll be a new adventure.
Yes.
That's
I mean, I do like that take on it because I think in some ways we recognize that our lives are in different places. Every book we write, our kids are different ages. They have different needs.
There's a pandemic.
There's a pandemic. There's not a pandemic. There's travel. There's not travel. So we've had to be really flexible in the way that we work together. And I love it. I love that every time we start a book, it feels like the first time we've ever written a book. You know, it's stressful, but it also makes it really exciting. Like, can we do it again? Has this whole thing been a fluke? You know?
Is this when everyone finally finds out?
Is this book, how did you break it up by perspective? How did you break up this one, if you remember?
So this one we did all in Jess's point of view because the story is not so much just about the romance, but it's also about her relationship with herself as a mother, her relationship with the community, her relationship with her own mom. And we didn't want to sort of shortchange Jess's experience by having River's point of view in there. I, as a romance reader, Christina, a lot of romance readers really love having the hero's point of view in there. It just didn't work as well for this book. But like the book that we just finished drafting, we had alternating point of view. And in that case, we did actually we had dual point of view. It wasn't totally alternating, but we usually just take turns each chapter. So like, I'll be working on 1, she'll be doing 2. I'll do 3, she'll do 4, you know? And
in this one, she is sort of questioning whether or not River is in this. He stands to make a lot of money if this works. So it was good that we weren't necessarily in his head. And like in a holidays, you know, she's in a time loop. And so if it would have been in Andrew's point of view, he really just would have been like, the hell is wrong with her?
Why is she acting so weird?
I mean, it's still a credit to your writing, though, that River does feel so real and so fully developed. Seeing him through Jess's eyes, he still comes across as a fully formed character,
I love
even
that.
if we're not hearing his voice.
I mean, unless you're Edward Cullen, sorry to throw back to Twilight, but like most of us don't get to hear what people are thinking. And so, you know, it is nice to get in a hero's head. It is nice to get in a heroine's head if you're writing from the hero point of view, but that isn't life all the time. And so even if we don't get to use that as a narrative device to help you get to know the character, we still need to be good at writing other characters. So I'm really glad that we succeeded for you and that you felt River was real, because he's shy too. So it's hard to write getting to know somebody who's kind of like reserved and shy in that way. But yeah, I thought he was a lot of fun.
Gotta love a shy boy. They're so sweet. What do you ladies do when you hit a writing wall? Do you hit it at the same time, or can one of you kind of break out?
I mean, I want to knock on some wood.
Oh, sure. Sorry. If I cursed you, I apologize.
Only because I'm about to say, like, I feel like generally we have not ever hit a wall at the same time. We have both hit walls, but the nice thing about having a co-author is your brains are usually hopefully doing different things. And so when we hit a groove, it's great. When one of us is in a groove, it's great. And we can usually kind of shake something loose in the other one. But we have definitely both each had hard phases. I think mine was probably 2019, maybe 2018. And Christina had a hard year in 2016. So I think, you know, we've been able to like pull each other out of it.
That's lovely.
And and figuring out ways to sort of trick your brain. So for me, it was like writing with an Apple Pencil. Because it transcribes, you know, it turns it into words, or handwriting, or I saw this thing that said, you know, if you write in Comic Sans, that it tricks your brain. And so sometimes I'll forget to change it and I'll send it to Lo. It's like, surprise, tacky surprise. So you just have to find a way. I used to just sit at my desk and just try and make it work. And that really only just makes you miserable. So, but luckily, you know, we have each other so we can talk. But also when we do freak out, it tends to be at different points in the process.
Yeah.
So
I freak her outer, and I freak out.
I'm an early freak. Yeah.
Yeah. She freaks out when we have chapter 1. I'm like, we got this. I have all the momentum. I'm so excited. And then I get like 3/4 of the way through the book and I'm like, well, we finally written a book that nobody's going to read. And it's terrible. And I hate every word. And Christina's just like, everything is going along as normal.
Yeah. My freak out in the beginning is like, who thought it was a good idea to pay me to do this?
Oh.
I don't know what I am doing every single book. I've called Lo in tears before.
Oh, well, I'm glad you have each other for when you have those freakouts.
Yes.
Oh yeah, and they don't last long. It's
No.
okay. It's all good.
So, would you ever consider writing a book outside of romance or YA romance? Write any horror stories that we're going to get to read?
Well, so the book that we just turned in doesn't have a title yet, but we've been calling it Adventure Romance. And that one's sort of like Romancing the Stone meets The Hangover, but gender swapped. And it's like action and romance and desert and treasure hunting. And it is seriously so fun. Like, we had so much fun writing that book. And so that's a little bit of a departure for us. And then the one that we're starting on Monday is a take on, it's like Sexy Clue. So we're doing like a murder mystery on an island off the French Mediterranean, but it's romance. But it's just like, we're just trying to take some bigger swings, you know? I think we love contemporary romance and we just want to like stretch our arms a little bit in the space, right? And I think, you know, I think it'd be fun to write a thriller. It would take a lot of plotting. And I love the idea of someday writing like a pop science nonfiction book, but it just is a matter of time. You know?
Sure. Any chance that Romancing the Stone Hangover book will be something that we can read soon? Because that sounds like what I just want to gobble up. And
I know.
Sexy Clue.
I really want that one to come out sooner. It is coming out, I think, spring of 2022. So.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
It sounds amazing.
It'll be here before you know it because time is a wizard.
Time doesn't exist. It's a flat circle. You are
Yes.
right. So what about other genres that you like to read? Are there any books that you would recommend to people that you just love that maybe they don't think about if they're mostly romance readers?
I'm a huge thriller reader. So I love the sort of domestic thrillers where it's like everybody's looking in each other's windows, and you know. So I've read My Lovely Wife by I think Samantha Downey, I think, and that book was just like, what the hell did I just read? And I loved it. And Sherry Lapina. There's this one that's called Someone We Know. And I just love those so much. And then I also love like Leanne Moriarty. So like Big Little Lies and The Husband's Secret and that kind of thing.
I love reading nonfiction. I have the favorites that everybody has. I love Mary Roach. I love Eric Larson. I recently, maybe a couple weeks, just finished a book called Why Fish Don't Exist. And it's about this taxonomist who like identified a ton of different species of fish. And there's just this whole crazy story about how his collections were destroyed by all these natural disasters and how he kind of rebuilt his collection. But it sounds a little dry. It's not. It's a fascinating book and it's really good. So I really recommend that one. And then anything by Eric Larson. I just love his writing.
So in romance, do you ladies have a favorite trope that you like to go back to? Or are there any tropes that you're just like, this is just not for a Christina Lauren book?
I mean, I think if you start with tropes for drafting a book, you end up limiting who your characters are. Like we try and start with the characters or the conflict or the situation, and then the tropes kind of come naturally when you're writing romance. I know we love writing enemies to lovers because it's fun and we can make each other laugh. I mean, basically, she is my target audience and I am her target audience. And so if she makes me laugh or swoon, then we're happy, and vice versa. So we love writing enemies to lovers. As a reader, I really love that like unrequited crush book where it's like the brother's best friend that you had a crush on when you were younger, or the college crush that you meet when you're older and more successful, or you're down on your luck or whatever. Like I love that.
You're probably not going to read any like dark romance from Christina Lauren, though.
Yeah, no. I won't see as somebody falling in love with their kidnapper. That's not,
okay.
Yeah, no.
That's not where we're going to go.
Yeah. Which leads me to, I feel like a Christina Lauren novel is always going to make you swoon. Can you kind of talk about how you've perfected that ability to make the readers just sort of go, oh, and want to hug the book at the end?
I mean, I think we try to figure it out every single time. So, I mean, it goes back to what Lo said. I think that we sort of write for each other. And so we sort of know each other's buttons, and that helps a little bit. But also writing a character that is the character, like that they would fall in love with. Writing that person specifically so that they do the things that they would sort of need to fall in love with. What do you think?
Yeah, and I mean, we've been successful to different extents with each of our books. I mean, The Unhoneymooner sells like crazy, and that came out 2 years ago, and that's a pretty closed door romance. It's not super sexy. Another one of our books that has sold a lot is Josh and Hazel or Beautiful Player, and both of those are much more racy than Unhoneymooner. So it's not a matter of how steamy the scenes are. I think we try and listen to readers who we trust tell us, like, I wanted more romance, I wanted more time, just them, I wanted this. Like, we're constantly listening to feedback because our goal is to give readers something that they'll enjoy reading. That's like literally our job, right? So we want to be good at our jobs. So we want to make sure we hit that balance right.
Let's see. Oh, so you showed your beautiful cover for the Soulmate Equation at the beginning. Do you get any say or input on your covers and also your audiobook readers? I know Emma was telling me that she's been listening to the audio and that the reader is just phenomenal.
We've been very lucky. Do you want to talk about covers, Christina?
We have a lot of say in covers now. Usually they say to us now, what do you want?
Always.
To have an idea. Yeah.
From the very beginning.
Yeah, but they don't always, like, they might come back to us with something that we don't like, but I swear it almost always changes back to something that we do. Because they want us to be, obviously they know that we know our audience and we know the genre, and they want us to be happy with the cover and feel like it represents, what's inside, but also, sales. It's always like, we love this cover, but we're going to take it to sales and see what they think. But a lot of our covers, Lo has like drawn them on napkins. And, like the Roomies cover looks almost exactly like what Lo drew. Sweet Filthy Boy, Lo basically drew that on a napkin. It hung in our PR rep, Kristen Dwyer's office forever. This one, we basically found some art and we're like, we want something like this. And then Lo drew a picture of sort of what she wanted. And it looks almost exactly like what Lo drew.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And I think if not every debut author gets to give that much feedback. But if your books do well and your instincts seem right, then your publisher is more likely to listen to you. Like if you know your market really well. And I think we've just studied a lot of cover design stuff, and the audiobooks. So for Beautiful Bastard, that was our first published book back in 2013. We didn't even know we were getting an audiobook. We were like sent a link to download it on release day. We're like, what? This is amazing. And so she was great. Her name is Grace Grant. And since then, again, if your book sells well, you get more input on stuff like audiobooks. And so we have chosen our narrators for pretty much every book, not every single one. And we're super lucky. So Patty Murin, she played Anna for Frozen on Broadway. And she is amazing. She did The Honey Don't List, which was actually nominated for an Audie Award. She did that with another narrator named John Root. And then she also did In a Holidays, and now she's doing the Soulmate Equation. And you can pry her narration out of our cold dead hands, basically, because she is so good at it that we will like chase her down. She really does bring them all to life so well. And I really recommend the audiobooks. She does a great job.
She does.
Yeah.
She makes it feel new even to us.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So I know you have a writing partner in each other, but if you could have any writing partner or mentor, living or dead, is there anyone that you would dig up from the grave and say, hey, you're going to come write with us now?
Ooh.
I mean, I'm way too insecure, I think, to show my like ugly parts to anyone else. I'll just stick with Lo.
I mean, honestly, I don't know that I want to offer my services to Lisa Klepis, but I would love to have Lisa Klepis write a book in front of me so I can learn how she does it, because her craft is beyond anything that I mean, she's amazing. And the way that she layers in other stories that you're going to pick up in the next book or 2 books from then in the current book without it feeling like you're like being pulled from a scene. She's amazing.
Is there a Lisa Klepis book that you would recommend for somebody to start with if they've never read her before?
I mean, I think the Ravenelle series is a good place to start with her. You can't go wrong with any of her books. So the first one would be Cold Hearted Rake. And then the next one is Marrying Winterborn, which is like probably my favorite book of the series, but they're all just really good. And if you guys want a great audio recommendation for romance, her audiobooks are spectacular.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So in the past, romance books and authors haven't always gotten the respect that some other genres have, which is unfortunate and not good. But do you think, is that changing at all in your mind? Is there anything that would help it change more?
I think what would help it change more is when people are writing about romance, that they read romance and know about the genre, because I think a lot of times people write about it and they haven't read a romance novel in 10 years or 15 years or
If
whatever.
ever.
And they say a lot of sort of cliche things that are not like, romance is so progressive and so feminist and diverse. And I think that would surprise so many people that think they know what romance is. And every time I think that it's getting the respect it sort of deserves, you turn around and see somebody go, you know, well, I gave this book 4 stars because that's as many as I can give a romance novel, or say it's their like guilty pleasure, which I hate that phrase so much. It feels some way that they feel like they have to justify or apologize for reading.
Yeah, we see a lot of that on social media. Like social media reviews will be like, I just took a little break from my normal nonfiction and literary fiction stuff to read this romance, and it was super fun. And it's like, you don't have to give a disclaimer. You can just read a book and enjoy it. And I think for us, it's really, I love what Christina said about people writing about romance who are in the genre. That's like, if you take away one thing from this discussion, please take that away. But, you know, it's easy for us to be in this bubble of like happy romance landia, because this is the space where we live in. We have our colleagues who are amazing, primarily women writing. We love this community, this sisterhood. It's rising tides, lifts all boats. It really is so supportive. And then we'll kind of pull up short when something comes across our feed and remember, oh, right, like it's not seen this way from the outside, the way that we see ourselves from the inside. So it's a bummer, but
and Lo had said
people who don't read romance think. I just don't want them.
Lo had said this thing once. She did this big thread on Instagram that's like in our highlights now, that for some reason as a society we tend to give more weight and importance to things that are sad and tragic as opposed to things that are filled with happiness and joy. And I'm not really sure why that is. Things that are like happy and about falling in love and things tend to be seen as like junk food and, you know, frivolous. But I think people would, you know, society tends to treat most things that women love that way. So whether that be books or movies or TV or music, like the thing that's great about Bridgerton is that it hopefully showed people that there were 84 million individual households that watched that people want those kinds of stories. But for some reason, it's just seen as less important because, you know, it's a happily ever after.
So, as you said, romance is extremely feminist and progressive. What is the role and work of a Christina Lauren hero to dismantle the patriarchy?
I think it starts with what Christina said earlier about the hero's role in our book is to fit into her life where she needs it. It's not we're never going to have a hero who's like fixing her, completing her, you know, he's not the missing puzzle piece, right? He is a person who can complement her life just like she is for him. And I think that that's really important to us, that is the point you have to start when you want people to see women as fully actualized, right? They're not missing anything without a man, without a partner, whoever that may be. And so I think, you know, you're not going to find that in our books.
And what he wants ultimately is for her to be successful and happy.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So what is the first romance that you each read, and would they be ones you would recommend to people today?
I know exactly what it was. The first romance novel I ever read was Palomino by Danielle Steele. And my mother is wonderful. She's very supportive. She reads all of our books. But when I was growing up, she's both my parents went to like a very good school, and they're like literary readers. And, you know, the idea that I would spend my allowance money at the used bookstore on Danielle Steele books was a little like, you know, jarring to them. And now they embrace it. But I haven't read it in forever. And yes, absolutely. Everybody should read Danielle Steele. Like, she's foundational to the genre. Come on. She's fun.
Whereas my mother read romance voraciously. Growing up, we had a 2-car garage that was wall to wall bookcases filled like 2 deep with paperbacks, like Harlequins, everything. And she used to get them at the used bookstore for like $0.25 or something. And I wasn't supposed to read them, but I thought that I had like this insane skill that I could pick one up and I could just get it to open right to the like sex scene. I thought that was some sort of, you know, magic or something. So I read so many of those. My mom had a million Barbara Cartman books. And so we always joke that I just thought that she was like the prettiest thing I had ever seen. So whenever I buy something sort of flashy or like sparkly, I'm like, and my transformation into Barbara Cartman is nearing completion. But I think the first one that I remember was the Thornbirds. Which I have not read since I was little, and I don't really know how well it would hold up. I remember very little about it, aside from it was scandalous, and I loved every second.
It's perfect. What is the last book that made you join the Bad Decision Book Club, aka staying up until 3 a.m. and going, oh crap, I just read an entire book and now I have to function in 2 hours?
So it would be Bombshell by Sarah MacLean, which is out in August. So pre-order it because it's amazing. But I have had a crazy week. My son broke his arm and we've just been going through all this stuff. So I have been like really trying to mind my bedtime. But the book that I read before this one that has just destroyed me and I can't shut up about, it's called The Love Hypothesis, and it's by Ali Hazelwood. It's out in September and it's just adorable. It's like, it's so cute. If you like Soulmate Equation, it's like the Soulmate Equation meets like My Favorite Half Nightstand. It's like rom-com science. It's so perfectly done, and it was a ton of fun.
Wonderful.
I just finished just yesterday, actually, Instructions for Dancing by Nicola Yoon, which is a YA book, but it's the sweetest, swooniest, sort of joyful book. I mean, it just came out this week. And the last one that I stayed up really late was not even close to being out yet. Sally Thorne sent us really like her first draft to a book that she was getting ready to send to her agent. And it's so different. When Losa is like talking about taking big swings, this is like, so I've never read anything like it. So Sally started in Fandom with us and wrote this like crazy angsty thing. But so it's like a combination of that and The Hating Game. And it is so delicious. I cannot wait.
It's like funny, twisty, dark, sexy. Yeah, that's on my list after I finish Bombshell, and I cannot wait.
Yeah. So like I would love to write a book with Sally Thorne because she's so voicey and clever and writes things in ways that like I would never think. So I'm like, oh my God, Christina Lauren and Sally Thorne, that would be so awesome. But like if you put Sally and I together, like we would probably never get anything done because we're both sort of
it's not really
messes. Lo would be like, focus.
focus.
Okay. It's good to know that about yourselves. So
she's being kind. It's her nice way of saying that I'm incredibly neurotic and
no, it's me saying that left to my own devices, when I wrote fic, it took me a year to write 140,000 words. That Christina could never have written this many books without Lauren.
So let's see. So you, if I'm not mistaken, you published 2 books during the pandemic, correct?
3.
You know, 3. Oh my
3.
gosh.
Well, it depends on when you consider the pandemic over.
Yeah. We had The Honey Dauntless came out March 22nd last year, and that was brutal.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's fine. It was like still a fun book, but it was a hard time. And then In the Holidays was October, and yeah, this one came out May 18th.
Wow. I forgot my question. Hold on, guys. That just blew my mind.
A lot of virtual events, but
I said that one day on Twitter. I had said something like, "This will be our 3rd book in pandemic," and I think people thought that I was like being braggy pants, but no, I was like, "Listen, wear your mask because I want to see people in person."
I mean, while I am very appreciative that you could do this because, you know, it's hard to get to Southern Maryland. So thank you for doing it this way for us. So in you don't really talk about did the pandemic happen in Soulmate Equation? Did it happen beforehand, or is it just wonderful and never did? That's how I took it, at least.
Yeah, in the book, it's not a thing.
Awesome.
And part of that is because we were writing it in the scariest time of it. And so when we were writing it in March and April of last year, we didn't know if this was going to be a new reality. We didn't know if it was going to be gone in July. We had no idea. So we were like, do we include it? And I'm glad that we didn't, because I think we're all going to need a break from thinking about it and living in that space. And if we ever do write pandemic into our book down the road, I think it'll be when we're all like, we just don't have the PTSD of quarantine and social distancing and not seeing people for so long, still in our recent memory.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So do you have, like, looking back on the books that you've written so far, do you have one that you can say it was the most fun to write or the most fun character to come up with? Or is that like being asked to choose your favorite kid? I only have one, so.
It is a little bit, because I think, and this is going to be kind of a boring answer, and I'm sorry, but in order for our books to please readers, our favorite kind of always has to be the one that we're working on at that moment, right? Because if we're not deeply in love with it, you guys aren't going to fall deeply in love with it. And I think, honestly, and I won't name which ones, but I think the ones that we have had the hardest time falling in love with ourselves are also the ones that readers have had the hardest time falling in love with. So, but I think, you know, if I look back across our collection, I mean, obviously I love the Soulmate Equation. It has so much science geekiness in it, but I really love Love in Other Words. Autobiography is very special to both of us. And actually that one you guys can read for free online this month of June for Pride. And so we have the link, I think, in our Instagram profile, but we might be able to send that to you guys. And yeah, I don't know. They're all really fun. What about you, Christina?
In some ways, the very first books are so special because we seriously had no idea what we were doing. Like we turned in Stranger before Beautiful Bastard had even come out. So in some ways we missed that whole sort of flaily second book, you know, thing. So in some ways I would love to go back and like watch us and just see how like we were just high on adrenaline all the time and like, oh my God, they're paying us to do this. For me, 2016, I was really sick. And when I came back from it, I just like, you know, brains are weird. And I just got in my own head and had convinced myself that I was just an imposter and what was I doing and why was Low riding with me and all of these things. And so we started writing Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating. And in that, I think that was like a moment where I went, oh my God, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But it didn't make any sense, the things my brain was saying, but that's why it sucks, is because it never makes sense. It's never true, but brains are weird. So that book has a special place just because it was like very like reaffirming for me. But the adventure book was probably the most fun that we've ever had writing.
And Josh and Hazel, I don't understand how anybody could not love that book. It's just, oh my gosh.
That was really fun.
Yeah. Let's see. So if HBO were to come to you tomorrow and be like, hey, Christina, hey, Lo, we want to make a movie out of one of your books, which one would it be in your head?
Well, we have a screenplay for Roomies that Christina and I wrote, and we've been working on it with Andy Fickman as director and Jenna Dewan's production company since like 2018. We've been working on that, and Village Roadshow has just come on and bought the project, so they'll start casting soon. So I mean, obviously, it'd be great if HBO was like, "Hey, Village Roadshow, bring that over here." But I mean, I think, and then Honeymooners has been optioned. It has a screenplay that's really funny. But if I could think of one that like hasn't been picked up yet, I'm going to either say autobiography or the adventure book, because I think the adventure book, it just would be like the joy of Indiana Jones with like the kissing of, I don't know, a Christina Lauren book. So that one, that's what I'm going to say.
Yeah. I'm going to say, you're killing me that I'm going to have to wait until 2022 to read this.
No,
it's the best. It's the best torture I've ever had. It's great. So let's see. This is a very important question. If you could be a judge or a contestant on any reality TV show, where would we see Christina Lauren? Either together or separate?
This is so easy.
What is it?
Well, I want to be a judge on Top Chef. Make me some delicious food.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I never watch reality TV because it stresses me out. It's just unscripted. Anything could happen, you know. But it's funny because Lo watches Top Chef, and I'm like watching Guy Fieri or something.
We do sometimes watch Survivor, but I would not want to be a contestant on Survivor.
No, are you kidding?
On my couch with my hand in a bag of chips while I'm watching them like fight it out. So
I would lose, and I would be the first kicked off.
Oh. Well, Christina, since you do not want to participate in the magical reality TV show we're making, which BTS song do you want to sing in front of everyone on stage with the band?
Oh, no. If I ever saw BTS, I would be like, I'm sorry. I don't look. I would like to sit in the front row while they sing, which I have.
Amazing.
But I'll just take sitting in the audience.
Okay. They'll bring you on stage and just sing directly to you. That can be your...
I would probably still die. I would burst into flames. I would hate that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I would just be like, just read my book.
Oh.
Just hold it. Let someone take a picture of you with it.
All right, let's see. How about I'll do one more question and then we'll turn it over to some questions from our lovely audience. Let's see. Well, we talked about this a little bit, but if there was somebody we talked about Lisa Klepis being a good for historical. Do you have any recommendations? Actually, I would love one for your books and one for another author of a contemporary or another subgenre of romance that you would give to a romance newbie to say, hey, you will fall in love with romance. Read this book.
I mean, I think if somebody comes into our books and wants comedy, we would probably hand them Honeymooners. If they want like sincere heart swells, we'd give them Love in Other Words or Soulmate Equation. And for somebody else, I mean, I would be happy with anybody picking any of our books off our shelves. So I'm super proud of them. And then I think for some other author, if they want contemporary, I mean, you really just can't go wrong with The Hating Game. It's such a good way to get into the genre. But if you want, if you're coming from fantasy, I think Sarah J. Maas is great. I think Cressley Cole, she writes some spicy paranormal that's so gripping and great. Historical, we love Sarah MacLean. She's smart, she's concise. And if you like literary romance, nobody is doing literary romance better than Kate Claiborne. So I would give somebody Love Lettering because it's just a beautiful book.
Do you have any?
All of this.
Oh, perfect. Okay. All right. So I have at least one question from the audience. How long does it take to typically write a book from start to publication for you ladies?
When it comes to how long it takes us to write it, it takes us as long as you give us. If you give us a year, it would not take us a year. We've already finished our book that comes out in 2022. And we're getting ready to start our book that comes out in 2023. So it takes us, I would say, like 4 months is a good time for us to draft a book, maybe a little longer, depending on what's going on. And then it just depends how long it takes for our editor to get us first pass revisions and line edits. And
They usually like about 9 months, 9 to 12 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, so somebody asked, so you're on a book launch tour. How does that work during a pandemic, and how does it compare to doing tours in the past?
So this is our third virtual book tour. The first one for Honey Don't List in March, everybody was like, what's happening? We had to cancel our events that were in person. We had to cancel book tour. So we were all a little like jittery. It was weird. By the time Holidays came out in October, we had like hit our stride. We figured it out. We got it. So I think now we are comfortable with virtual events, but we also know there's a lot of Zoom fatigue. So thank you everybody for being here, because it's just nice to know that people still want to talk about books on Zoom. And it's different in person. I mean, Christina and I like readers. We are readers first and foremost. We come from a fandom where it's like everybody's sharing love for stories, and everybody's a reader and a writer, and they contribute. And so I think, we miss that community vibe of in person. But this has been nice too, because like you said, we wouldn't be able to go to Maryland necessarily just for a couple hours to chat with you. And so we also have readers that are all over the world that get to tune into these events, and they wouldn't maybe never have been able to see us talk about our books before. So there are definitely benefits to doing things virtually. I hope we keep some of the aspects of this even when the world opens up fully.
Please do, because it's been amazing to be able to do things like this. So, okay, I got a few. Oh, where did my questions go? There they are. Okay, somebody said, what kind of soulmate equation match do you think you and your significant other are? Would you even want to know? And how do you think knowing that information would have impacted your own personal love story?
Can I answer this one too? Okay, so usually we take turns, but this is one that I kind of want to field, because part of the thing for us is that the genetically test, the DNA duo, it doesn't give you a single match, right? It gives you potentially a list of names of people with different compatibility scores. So what it says is you are, Jess and River are 98, 99, whatever percent compatibility. That means that there is a very high likelihood that they will find happiness with each other. But when you have a 13% match, that means that there's still a 13% chance that this person could be your soulmate. So like, you're going to get a lot more base matches than you are going to get diamond matches. So statistically speaking, and River says this in the book, you are much more likely to find a soulmate with a base match than you are ever to even get a diamond match. And it's one of the things that we like about this like fictional assay is that it's not saying here's your one person. It's saying like, these are the odds, do with it what you will. So I know that Christina and I are with our perfect matches. It doesn't matter to me whether it would come back as a 14% or a 99. Like, we have found our diamond matches with whatever score. And so I think people need to remember that, like, when they're reading that, I know the idea of a DNA matchmaking is not real yet, but I think the way we did it, we tried to be open to the idea that the score is just one piece of it, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody asked if you ever disagree on plot points or situations, and then how do you resolve that issue?
Very rarely do we ever disagree. People always want to know if we fight, and like we argue occasionally in the same way that you like get on the nerves of like your best friend or your spouse. Lo always says like you would not want to be in a relationship with someone who you agree with all the time, because then you're not being honest. You want to be able to like disagree and have it be okay. I think our personalities work really, really well, because Lo feels better when she sort of like knows everything that's going on and is kind of planning it out. And I don't want to do any of that. And so I'm just like, yep, okay, fine, yep, works for me. So anytime we have any sort of like thing in the book where something comes up, it is usually because one of us is not on the same page. Usually me has forgotten something, or is thinking something is the way that we originally did it. But that being said, if there's ever a moment where one of us is like, wait. Like if I said to Lo, okay, I just feel really strongly about this, she would know that I don't normally feel insanely, strongly about certain things. And she would go, okay, let's talk, in the same way that, she would. It's never, if any disagreements we have, it's like very rarely ever about the books. And if that happened, then it's like, okay, explain to me, sell me on it, kind of a thing. That's
great. It sounds like good communication, which is great.
Yeah.
Somebody asked if is there a reason that you pick third-person narrative, particularly in this book, as opposed to first-person narrative in some of your past books?
So part of that was about moving into hardcover, which is a more commercial fiction space, and just romance readers are very familiar with first-person narration, especially first-person present. And we wanted it to have a more upmarket feel, not in a bad way against romance at all. I think for us, it was just to try and get a bit more of the hardcover feel to the story. And it was also kind of a fun challenge for us. Like, can we still make readers feel like this is a Christina Lauren book, even though it has a different narrative style? And I think we did. It was really fun to write it this way. It took a little while. We actually drafted it in first person just to get the voice, and then we edited it over. So we wrote this book twice, basically. But yeah, it was super fun. I hope it works for you guys.
I don't think I've heard anybody say, like, I hated that this was in third person. I think occasionally there was like, oh, I just realized that this was in third person. Mm-hmm. But we dropped it in first person present and then moved it over to third person past. And Lo did most, like, I think all of that. And when we did it for our next book, I was like, oh
Never
my
again.
God,
This
is the biggest job. I'm so sorry.
No.
And actually, I have one more audience question that's kind of perfect that rounds us out to an hour. But going back to when you met in writing fanfic, what drew you to the Twilight fandom? And do you think any of that? The question disappeared.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I see it. Does it come through in our published book?
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Sorry.
I love this question because there are a lot of misconceptions about fandom, especially the Twilight fandom. And I think people came to that space for a lot of different reasons. It was a huge group of, like Christina said, mostly women writing stories and reading stories. And the reason that we came to it were totally varied as the number of people there. I mean, we had some people who just couldn't let go of the characters and they wanted to read more. We had some people who came in because the last book didn't work for them and they kind of wanted to like reset how the story ended. We had people who came into the fandom because they wanted to learn how to write. A lot of people came into the fandom because they weren't finding what they wanted to read in romance and they found it there. And I think what you'll see is a lot of the books that had come out in 2009 to 2013 had that voice of like first person present tense, very like experiential. You are reading from the heroine's point of view. You're getting to see the female gaze in these stories. And I think there was a huge influence of Twilight fandom on romance that still lasts to this day. And it was really just a joyful place. It was a lot of people just writing for the first time. And then there were people who've been writing for years. So for sure, it influenced us a ton. We want readers to feel even reading our books now the way they felt when they were reading our fan fiction 12 years ago, so.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's amazing to get to talk to you about this book, The Soulmate Equation, and just your books in general and your writing. And I cannot tell you how grateful St. Mary's County Library is that you would take your time to do this with us today.
Thank you for having us. This was a ton of fun. And thank you everybody for coming. We hope you love the book.
Yes, everyone go buy it, go put it on hold, go read it. It's beautiful and everyone should read it for sure.